had never seen creatures so terrifying in her entire life. The apex stood 3 meters tall. Their bodies were covered in dark scales that shifted between black and deep purple depending on the light. Their faces combined the worst features of big cats and reptiles, long snouts filled with teeth, vertical pupils that tracked movement with horrible precision, and ears that swiveled independently like radar dishes. Their claws could cut through steel. Their tails ended in bone spikes. Everything about them screamed predator. And was a small human woman with no weapons, no claws, and no backup. She worked as on Orbital Station 7, a diplomatic hub floating in neutral space. Her job was simple: study alien species and help humans understand them. She had spent 3 years learning about the apex from reports and recordings. Nothing had prepared her for seeing them in person. The diplomatic meetings had been going on for 16 hours. Was exhausted. She had excused herself to find a quiet corner and rest her eyes for a few minutes. The corridors in the apex section of the station were dimly lit and warm, designed to match their home world. She found a small alcove with a bench and sat down with a tired sigh. That was when she heard the sounds. Small clicking noises, soft growls, the scrape of claws on metal. Her heart stopped. She turned her head slowly and saw 3 shapes emerging from a side corridor. They were apex cubs. Each one stood about a meter tall, roughly the size of a large dog. Their scales were lighter than the adults, more gray than black, and their eyes were huge in their small faces. They moved with clumsy grace, bumping into each other and making chirping sounds that might have been laughter. They had clearly wandered away from their guardians, and now they had found her. Knew the rules, she knew the warnings. The apex protected their young with a ferocity that made human parents look relaxed. No outsider had ever been allowed near apex cubs. The punishment for touching one was death, not imprisonment, not negotiation. Death. She should run. She should call for help. She should do anything except sit here. But the cubs were already staring at her. The smallest one, a female guest based on her softer features, tilted her head and made a questioning sound. The middle one, a male with darker patches around his eyes, crouched low as if preparing to pounce. The largest one hung back, watching with an intelligence that seemed too old for such a young face. Made a decision. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it would kill her. But she had spent her whole life studying animals, and she knew one thing for certain: predators could smell fear. If she ran, they would chase. If she screamed, they would attack. But if she stayed calm... She lowered herself to the floor, slowly, carefully. She made herself as small as possible, tucking her legs beneath her and resting her hands in her lap. She breathed out slowly and let her shoulders drop. Then she began to hum. It was an old song, a Korean lullaby her grandmother had sung to her when she was small. She could not remember all the words, but the melody was burned into her memory. Soft and slow, rising and falling like waves on a shore. The cubs froze. Their ears swiveled forward, focusing on the sound. The smallest one took a step closer, then another. Kept humming. She did not look directly at them. She kept her gaze soft and unfocused, watching from the edges of her vision. The middle cub was circling now, approaching from her left side. The largest one still had not moved. Minutes passed. The smallest cub was now close enough to touch. Could see the individual scales on her snout, the way her nostrils flared as she sniffed the strange creature making the strange sounds. Then the cub did something unexpected. She lay down. Right next to his leg, the small apex female curled into a ball and closed her eyes. Her tail wrapped around her body, and within seconds she was asleep. Almost stopped humming from shock, but she forced herself to continue. The lullaby flowed on, note after note, as the middle cub approached and sniffed her hand. His tongue flicked out rough and warm and tasted her skin. He made a satisfied sound and flopped down on her other side. Only the largest cub remained standing. He watched with those too intelligent eyes, and she felt like she was being judged by something ancient and wise. She met his gaze for just a moment, then looked away respectfully. The cub walked forward. He did not lie beside her like the others. Instead, he climbed directly into her lap, turned around 3 times like a cat finding the perfect spot, and settled his full weight against her chest. His head rested on her shoulder. His warm breath tickled her neck. Within minutes, all 3 cubs were asleep. Sat perfectly still. She could not move even if she wanted to. 40 kilograms of apex predator was pinning her in place, and 2 more were pressed against her sides. Their purring, a deep vibration that she felt in her bones, filled the corridor. She was terrified, she was amazed. She was also, she realized, deeply honored. These cubs had chosen to trust her. They had looked at a strange alien creature and decided she was safe. They had given her their vulnerability, the most precious thing any predator could offer. Did not know how long she sat there. Time lost meaning in that warm, dark corridor. She stopped humming eventually, but the cubs did not wake. They just pressed closer, seeking her warmth. She was so focused on staying still that she did not hear the approaching footsteps. The first warning she had was a shadow falling over her. Looked up. Elder of the Apex stood before her. He was the largest apex she had ever seen, nearly 3.5 meters of scale and muscle, and barely contained violence. His eyes burned like yellow fire. His claws were fully extended. Behind him stood 40 apex warriors. Every single one had weapons drawn. His translator crackled in her ear as spoke. His voice was low, calm, more frightening than any roar. You touch what no outsider has touched in 10,000 years. In the security room 3 levels above, watched the scene on his monitor and felt his blood turn to ice. Hands shook as he reached for the emergency communication panel. Beside him, a young communications officer barely out of training stared at the monitor with her mouth hanging open. Is she dead? Whispered. Not yet, said. His voice was rough, but she will be if she moves wrong. On the screen, sat perfectly still. 3 apex cubs slept on and around her body. 40 armed warriors surrounded her in a half circle, their weapons humming with deadly energy. And the most powerful apex alive stood close enough to kill her with a single swipe of his claws. Had known for 5 years. She was quiet, gentle. She cried at sad movies and refused to kill spiders. The idea of her facing down the galaxy's most dangerous predators seemed impossible. But there she was, and she was not running. In the corridor, forced herself to breathe, in and out, slow and steady. The cubs were still asleep. She could feel their warmth, their trust, their complete relaxation. They had no idea that death stood 3 meters away. You touch what no outsider has touched in 10,000 years, repeated. His translator gave his words a flat, mechanical quality, but could hear the emotion underneath. Shock, rage, and something else, something she could not identify. She knew she should apologize. She knew she should beg for mercy. But looking at the sleeping cubs, feeling their small bodies pressed against her, she found she could not lie. They were scared, she said softly. They were alone. I did what any mother would do. Silence. The warriors shifted uneasily. His eyes narrowed to slits. For a long moment was certain she would die. Then made a sound. It was harsh and grinding, like rocks being crushed together. It took a moment to realize it was laughter. Mother, he said, you call yourself mother. You, a creature with no claws, no fangs, no armor. You could not hunt. You could not fight. A child of my species could kill you without effort. And you speak of motherhood. Motherhood is not about killing, replied. She was amazed at how calm her voice sounded. Inside, her heart was racing fast enough to burst. It is about protecting, comforting, making the small ones feel safe. Crouched down, his massive body folded with surprising grace, bringing his face close to level. His breath was hot and smelled of copper. His teeth were as long as her fingers. "And how would you protect them?" he asked. "If a predator came, if danger threatened, what would you do, little human mother?" Thought about this. She thought about her own mother, who had worked 3 jobs to feed her family. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a war and raised 6 children alone. She thought about all the human mothers throughout history who had faced impossible odds with nothing but love and determination. "I would put myself between them and the danger," she said. "I would fight with whatever I had, my hands, my teeth, my body. And if I could not win, I would make sure the cubs escaped while I bought them time." Was silent for a long moment. "You would die," he said finally. "Yes," agreed, "but they would live." Something changed in the old predator's eyes. The rage faded. The suspicion remained, but it was joined by something new, something that might have been respect. He straightened up and turned to his warriors. He spoke in the apex language which translator could not process fast enough to follow. The warriors exchanged glances. One of them, a female with a scar across her snout, lowered her weapon first. Others followed slowly. But they did not leave. They formed a wider circle and took up watchful positions. Sat down across from. He moved slowly, carefully, like a man sitting down for a long conversation. His tail curled around his feet. His claws retracted with soft clicking sounds. "We will wait," he said. "Wait for what?" "For them to wake." He gestured at the sleeping cubs. "When they wake, they will either accept you or reject you. If they reject you, you will be escorted out and we will pretend this never happened. If they accept you," he paused, "then we will have much to discuss." Nodded slowly, she understood. This was a test, but not for her. It was a test for the cubs. They had chosen to sleep on her, yes, but sleep was different from waking trust. When they opened their eyes and saw her face clearly, they might be frightened. They might attack. They might run. Or they might stay. Hours passed. Did not move. Did not move. The warriors stood their posts like statues in the security room and watched in exhausted silence. Other humans had gathered now, the engineer, the chef, a dozen others who had heard rumors and come to see. "Should we do something?" asked at one point. "Like what?" replied, "Start a war." So they waited. Finally, after nearly 6 hours, the smallest cub stirred. She made a sleepy chirping sound and stretched her tiny claws. Her eyes opened, golden and huge, and focused on space. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the cub made a sound. It was high and sweet, like a bird's call. She pushed her head under his chin and rubbed her scales against the human's throat. It was a greeting, a claim, a declaration of ownership. The other cubs woke next. They repeated the gesture, rubbing their heads against hands and arms and face. The largest one, the male who had claimed her lap, looked directly at and made a low, challenging growl. His eyes widened. "He claims you," the elder said slowly. "He claims you as pack, as family." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with weight of ancient tradition. "This has never happened. In 10,000 years of recorded history, no outsider has been claimed by our young." "What does it mean?" asked. Stood, he towered over her, but for the first time he did not seem threatening. He seemed almost gentle. "It means," he said, "that you are now under our protection. It means that your enemies are our enemies. It means that harming you is the same as harming our children." His eyes met hers. "It means, little human mother, that you are no longer alone." In the security room, let out a breath he had been holding for hours. "Well," said weakly, "I guess we should call Earth Command." 2 days had passed since the cubs claimed as their own. In that time, her life had changed completely. She had been moved from her small human quarters to a large suite in the apex section of the station. The room was warm and dark, designed for predator comfort, but the apex had added human touches: a proper bed, temperature controls, even a small kitchen stocked with foods she could eat. Spent most of her time with the cubs. She had learned their names, The smallest female was, the middle male was, and the largest was. They followed her everywhere. When she walked, they walked beside her. When she sat, they piled around her. When she tried to sleep, she woke up buried under warm, scaly bodies. She had started calling her Little Shadow, because the young female refused to let her out of sight. Was happy, exhausted but happy. She had no idea about the politics happening around her. Figured it out first. He was an engineer, quiet, careful, and very good at reading sensor data. He had been running a routine maintenance scan when he noticed something strange in the thermal readings. "That can't be right," he muttered, adjusting his equipment. But it was right. 12 distinct heat signatures, apex-sized, positioned on every elevated surface within line of sight of quarters. They were not moving. They had been there for at least 30 hours. "Went to find." "Snipers," he said, pulling up the data on a portable screen. "Look, here, here, here. There's a pattern. Every angle is covered. Anyone approaching her room would be visible to at least 3 of them." Studied the readings. His face went pale. "They're protecting her," he said slowly. "Or preparing to execute her." "No," shook his head. "If they wanted her dead, she would be dead. These are guard positions, defensive positions." He looked at with troubled eyes. "The Apex have assigned a sniper team to watch over a human." "Is that good or bad?" Did not answer. He went to find. The elder Apex was in his personal chamber, a vast room filled with trophies and weapons. He did not seem surprised when requested an audience. He did not seem surprised when asked about the snipers. "Yes," said simply. "They are mine, my personal guard, the finest warriors in the Apex fleet." "Why?" demanded. "Why assign them to?" Studied the human for a long moment. His yellow eyes were unreadable. "The female has been claimed by our young," he said. "This makes her family, but not all Apex accept this. Some believe she is a trick, a human scheme to weaken us. Some believe she should be killed before her influence spreads." He paused. "My snipers are there to ensure those beliefs remain unexpressed." Felt cold. "You're saying someone might try to kill her." "I am saying that if anyone tries, they will die before they can complete the attempt." Leaned forward. "Understand this, human. The female is now clan bonded. The cubs chose her. If she dies, we will glass whatever world is responsible. This is not a threat. This is simply what will happen." "Glass," repeated. "You mean?" "Total destruction. Orbital bombardment until the surface is nothing but melted rock." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. He might have been discussing the weather. "This is our way. Those who harm our young or those who belong to our young are erased, completely, permanently." Left the meeting in a daze. He found in the communications center and told her everything. "So we're either witnesses to the most important first contact event in human history," said slowly, "or we're all going to die in an alien war triggered by one and some sleepy cubs." "Pretty much," agreed. "Great, just great." Meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. She was too busy teaching how to play hide-and-seek. The game did not work well at first. Apex cubs were natural hunters. They understood hiding and seeking in terms of predator and prey. When hid behind a cabinet, tracked her by scent in seconds. When hid, he became so perfectly still and silent that walked past him 3 times without noticing. But eventually, they found a version that worked. Would hide an object, a toy or a treat, and the cubs would search for it. They loved this game. Their excited chirps filled the room as they hunted, and their triumphant roars when they found the prize made laugh. The smallest was the best at finding things. She had the sharpest nose and the most patience. Was the fastest, but he often rushed past hiding spots without checking carefully. Preferred to let his siblings do the work and then steal their prizes at the last moment. "That's cheating," scolded him gently. Made a sound that might have been a laugh and did it again. In the evenings, would read to them. She had downloaded human children's stories onto her tablet, and the cubs would gather around to look at the pictures, while her translator converted her words into apex growls and clicks. They especially loved stories about animals, dogs and cats and bears. They could not understand why humans kept such creatures as pets instead of eating them. They're friends, explained. Companions, they keep us from being lonely. Tilted her head, considering this. Then she climbed into his lap and pressed her face against the human's chest. Like you, the translator interpreted, you keep us from lonely. His eyes filled with tears. She hugged the small cub and pretended she was not crying. She did not know that 12 snipers watched this moment through their scopes. She did not know that received reports on her activities every 6 hours. She did not know that her name was being discussed in war councils across the Apex fleet. She only knew that 3 small predators loved her, and she loved them back. For now, that was enough. The formal dinner was supposed to be a celebration. 2 weeks after the cubs claimed, the Apex Council had agreed to officially recognize her status. She would be introduced to the full assembly of clan leaders, military commanders, and diplomats. She would be given a new name in the Apex language. She would become, legally and formally, a member of their species. Was terrified. She had never been good at public speaking. She hated formal events. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of apex predators while they judged her worthiness made her want to hide under her bed. But the cubs were excited. They bounced around her quarters, chirping and growling and getting in the way of every attempt to prepare, had somehow gotten hold of his formal dress and was dragging it around the room like captured prey, was practicing his fierce face in front of a mirror, sat in a corner, watching with his too intelligent eyes. "You are worried," he said through the translator. He was learning human speech patterns quickly. "A little," admitted. "Why, you are ours. No one will hurt you." Smiled and touched his snout gently. "Sometimes we get nervous even when we're safe. It's a human thing." Considered this. Humans are strange, he decided. Could not argue with that. The dinner was held in the station's largest hall. Long tables stretched across the room, covered with foods from a dozen worlds. The lighting was dim and red, perfect for apex vision. Hundreds of predators filled the space, their scales gleaming and their eyes bright. Entered with the cubs at her side, walked behind her, a massive presence that made other apex step aside. The room fell silent as they passed. At the head table, a seat had been prepared for. It was sized for a human, a clear statement that she belonged here. The cubs took positions around her, forming a protective triangle. Across the room, noticed an apex staring at her with open hostility. He was younger than but still massive and from many battles. His name, she had learned, was. He was rival and the leader of the faction that opposed her acceptance. Looked away. She had enough to worry about without adding political enemies to the list. The dinner proceeded smoothly. Speech after speech welcomed to the Apex people. Leaders expressed their respect for her courage. Warriors praised the cubs for their wise choice. Through it all, smiled and nodded and tried not to throw up from nervousness. Then the food arrived. Had been working in the kitchen for 3 days. As the only human chef trusted by the Apex, she had been given the honor of preparing dishes. She had created something beautiful, human foods presented in Apex style, arranged on bone plates with careful precision. But something was wrong. Noticed it as the servers carried the dishes out. One plate's plate had a slightly different color. The sauce was a shade too dark. The smell was a touch too sweet. Had spent years learning Apex cuisine. She knew every ingredient, every technique, every tradition, and she knew that this dish had been tampered with. She ran. Was in the security room, watching the dinner through hidden cameras. When burst in, out of breath and panicked, he knew immediately that something was wrong. "The food," gasped. "Something in the food, I don't know what, but it's wrong. It's..." Did not wait for her to finish. He turned too, Get a message to now, emergency channel. His fingers flew across her console. Sending, sent. In the dining hall, felt her tablet vibrate. She had almost ignored it. Checking messages during a formal dinner seemed rude, but something made her look. Do not eat food poisoned. This is not a drill. His blood turned to ice. She looked at her plate. The food sat there innocent and beautiful. Steam rose from the meat. The sauce glistened in the dim light. Was watching her. His eyes flicked to the tablet, then to the food, then back to her face. He understood. For one terrible moment did not know what to do. If she refused to eat, she would insult the apex. If she accused someone of poisoning her without proof, she would start a war. But if she ate... Then she remembered the monitoring drone. Had insisted she carry it. A small flying device, no bigger than her fist, designed to record her formal introduction for Earth archives. It floated near her shoulder, its single camera eye watching everything. Picked up her plate. The room watched. Hundreds of predators, silent and focused, waiting to see the human eat apex food for the first time. Turned to the drone. You must be hungry, she said softly. Working so hard, have some. She held the plate under the drone's sensor array and tipped the food into its intake port. The effect was instant. The drone sparked, shuddered, and crashed to the floor. Smoke poured from its body. The camera eye flickered and died. Silence. Then roared. The sound shook the walls. Glasses shattered. Smaller apex fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the rage in that terrible voice. Rose to his full height, his claws extended, his eyes blazing with fury. Treachery, he bellowed. Treachery in MY Hall, poison meant for the clan bonded, who dares? Across the room, tried to run. He made it 3 steps. The first sniper shot took out his left leg. The second shattered his right arm. He crashed to the ground, screaming, as warriors surrounded him with weapons drawn. Through the windows of the hall could see them now, the snipers on the rooftops. 12 figures barely visible in the darkness, their rifles still smoking from the shots. They had been watching, waiting, ready. Walked slowly to where lay bleeding. The elder looked down at the traitor with cold contempt. You tried to kill what is ours, said. You tried to harm the one our children chose. There is no punishment severe enough for this crime. She is not one of us, snarled through his pain. She is prey, she is nothing. Crouched down. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire hall. She sat with our young when they were lost. She sang to them when they were afraid. She fed poison to a machine rather than risk giving offense. He straightened up. She has shown more honor in 2 weeks than you have shown in your entire miserable life. He turned to his warriors. Take him, he will face the old punishment. Screams echoed as they dragged him away. Sat very still. The cubs had pressed against her, their bodies warm and protective, was growling softly, a continuous sound of warning, had buried her face inside, stood on his hind legs, his small claws extended, ready to fight anyone who came near. Approached the table. His rage had faded, replaced by something gentler. Are you hurt? He asked. Shook her head. She did not trust her voice. Good. The old predator looked at the cubs, then back at her. You acted with wisdom and courage. You did not panic. You did not accuse. You found a way to reveal the truth without starting a war. He paused. Perhaps you are more apex than we realized. Finally found her voice. I just didn't want to cause trouble. Made that grinding sound again, his laugh. Human, he said, you are the strangest kind of trouble we have ever encountered. And I am beginning to think that is exactly what we needed. 1 year later, stood in her grandmother's garden and watched the sunset paint the Korean mountains gold. The house was small and old. It had been in her family for generations. The walls were thin, the floors creaked, and the heating never worked properly in winter. But it was home. After everything that had happened on Orbital Station 7 had needed to come home. Her grandmother sat on the porch, drinking tea and pretending not to stare at the forest behind the property. 3 Apex shuttles were parked there. They were supposed to be hidden, but Apex were not good at hiding things. The ships were painted in camouflage patterns, yes, but they were also the size of small buildings. Every neighbor for 5 kilometers knew they were there. No one complained. The village had decided, collectively and without discussion, that the space tigers were good luck. Tourist visits had increased. Property values had risen. The local restaurant had created a special Apex welcome menu that was mostly raw meat arranged in artistic patterns. His grandmother approved. She had survived a war, raised 6 children alone, and run this farm for 50 years. 3 alien predators did not scare her in the slightest. "They're late today," the old woman observed. Checked her watch. "Give them 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, the forest erupted with noise. Trees shook. Birds fled. Small animals ran for cover as 3 shapes came bounding toward the house. Arrived first. She was no longer small, standing nearly 2 meters tall now, but she was still the fastest. She leaped over the garden fence in a single bound and skidded to a stop in front of her, tail wagging like an excited dog. "Mother," the translator called out. "We caught fish, big ones, we brought you the biggest." Appeared next, slower but more careful. He carried a basket in his jaws, human-made, purchased from the village store, filled with enormous river fish. He placed it at its feet with obvious pride. "I caught 3, he announced. "Only caught 2. "I caught the best ones," protested. Arrived last. He had grown the most over the past year, now standing nearly as tall as himself. His scales had darkened to true black, and his eyes had developed the calculating look of an adult predator. But when he saw, his expression softened. "Mother," he said simply. He did not bound or leap. He walked to her with dignity, then lowered his massive head so she could touch his snout. His grandmother watched this display with sharp eyes. "They're well-mannered," she said. "Better than some human children I've seen." "Grandmother," chirped, approaching the old woman. "We brought you flowers too, human flowers from the mountain." She dropped a bundle of wildflowers at the grandmother's feet. Half of them were crushed from the journey, and several were technically weeds, but the old woman accepted them with grave courtesy. "Beautiful," she declared. "I'll put them in water." The cubs spent the afternoon playing in the fields. The village children had overcome their initial fear weeks ago and now gathered whenever the space tigers visited. Today, 12 kids between ages 5 and 15 ran screaming with joy as chased them in circles. Had allowed 3 small children to climb onto his back and was now parading around the yard like a decorated horse. Sat with the older teenagers, discussing hunting techniques with the seriousness of a university professor. Watched from the porch, her heart full to bursting. Arrived in the evening. He came by car rather than shuttle. He had been promoted to head of the Human Apex Liaison Division, but he still preferred ground travel. Was with him, carrying a briefcase full of documents. "Official business," explained as he sat down with. "The Apex have made a formal request to the Galactic Council." Raised an eyebrow. "What kind of request?" Opened the briefcase and handed her a document. It was written in 3 languages, Apex, Galactic Standard, and Korean. The title made breath catch in her throat. Petition for Protected Kin Status, Humanity. They want to declare humans as protected species, explained. The same status they give to their own children. It means that any attack on humanity would be treated as an attack on the Apex themselves. "That's," struggled for words, "that's huge, that's unprecedented," finished. "In 10,000 years of Apex history, they have never offered this status to any other species. Ever." Looked at the document, her hands were shaking. Why would they do this? Smiled, explained it to the council. "Want me to read his speech?" He pulled out his phone and found the recording. His translated voice filled the small porch. "We judged humans by their bodies. We saw creatures without claws, without fangs, without armor. We saw prey. We were wrong. A pause. The human female showed us a different kind of strength. She protected our young with nothing but her presence. She faced death without fear. She revealed treachery without starting a war. She taught our cubs kindness and games and laughter. Another pause. When spoke again, his voice was softer. She had no weapons, no claws, no armor, yet she would have died to protect what was not even her own blood. This is a power we do not understand, but we respect it, and we wish to see more of it in the galaxy. The recording ended. Wiped her eyes, pretended not to notice. The ceremony will be held on the apex, said. You'll attend as the guest of honor. The cubs will be there, of course. Has already prepared your quarters. When? 2 weeks, the shuttle will pick you up from here. He paused. There will be security, a lot of security. The snipers will be back. Laughed softly. Of course they will. That night, after Anne had left and the village children had gone home, sat on the porch with her grandmother. The cubs were sleeping in the field, piled together in a warm heap of scales and claws. Are you afraid? Her grandmother asked. Considered the question. She thought about the journey ahead, the alien world she would visit, the ceremonies she would attend, the history she would help create. She thought about the dangers, the politics, the responsibility. Then she looked at the field, where 3 apex predators slept peacefully under the stars. She thought about the 12 snipers who would watch over her. She thought about words and the apex warriors who had pledged to protect her, and the entire civilization that had declared her family. She smiled. Grandmother, she said, I have 12 snipers on every roof I walk under, 3 apex predators who call me mother, and the most dangerous species in the galaxy has declared that harming me is a death sentence. She took her grandmother's weathered hand. I've never been safer in my life. Her grandmother nodded approvingly. Good, now go pack, and take warm clothes, space is cold. In the field, stirred in her sleep and made a soft chirping sound. Dreaming, perhaps, of chasing fish or playing games or curling up in her human mother's lap. Watched her for a moment, her heart full of love. Then she went inside to pack. The galaxy was waiting.